longest cedar splits. I offer sweat and splinters. Forest elders breathe their last. I'll bring them for your supper. Every piece of wood I bring carries a... Hey y'all, Kelly here. Welcome to the Ground Shots podcast, a podcast exploring our relationship to ecology through conversations and storytelling. So I am introducing this podcast today, but I am actually not going to be the main host. That's the first time in the whole history of this podcast that I will not be the main host. And I'm pretty excited about handing off this platform occasionally to other folks who want to do interviews. And in this occasion, Gabe, who has been on the podcast several times, Gabe Crawford, reached out to Dan Nanamkin, who was on episode 39 of the podcast, and wanted to check in again to see how he was doing and what he was up to with his projects. So I interviewed Dan last spring, pretty soon after COVID hit, and a lot has changed in that time. In that former episode of the podcast, we talked a lot about Dan's Young Warrior Society project, formerly named Sovereignty Camp, and Gabe volunteered at Sovereignty Camp a couple years ago. So Dan and Gabe have a personal relationship and are friends, so it's definitely a little bit of a different interview this time than it was with me and Dan, because I've never met him, and Gabe and Dan have a sweet relationship. So to remind you of who Dan is, I'll read his bio for you. Dan Nanamkin is from the Chief Joseph Band of Wallowa, Nez Perce, and Colville Confederated tribes of Washington State, and has been an advocate and teacher for indigenous culture, community unity, youth empowerment, racial equity, and peace for several decades. Prior to Standing Rock, Dan took one of the leads in helping to restore ancient canoe culture of the Northwest Plateau tribes, the River Warriors. This inspired him further to connect with the water, something that led him to Standing Rock. He endured months of peaceful frontline action at Standing Rock from September 2016 until March 2017. Dan advocates for people to be better informed, to get more involved, and to resist racism and violence, and to support the movement to protect Mother Earth. He is a public presenter, musician, and author who remains active in bringing forth awareness of Native culture. His mission is to connect modern-day people with the traditions that are still absolutely relevant and critical to life today. Dan hopes to bring back traditional knowledge of the earth, plants, medicines, and survival in a way to encourage healing, wellness, and respect for balance with Mother Nature and all living things. Please do consider supporting the Ground Shots podcast on Patreon. The link to our Patreon page is always found in the show notes, as well as other ways to support the project through one-time donations, and you can also leave us a review on iTunes. That would be really wonderful. To find our Patreon, it's also patreon.com/ofsedgeandsalt. Again, always found in our show notes. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hand this off to Gabe, and I really hope y'all enjoy this part 2 and check in with Dan Nanamkin. Okay, happy listening.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for coming back on this podcast. Kelly already had you on once, and I've been thinking a lot about you lately and Sovereignty Camp, and I know that you did a TED Talk somewhat recently, and I'm always just like warmed in my heart when I see you post things on social media, just in the way you speak to things, especially, it's been a difficult winter for me this year in Virginia because it's just gloomy and wet and interesting cultural dynamics here. And some of your posts have definitely brightened my spirits, and it inspired me to reach out to you just to see what's going on and to catch up, and kind of wanted to just get an update on where you're at with your projects and how this winter has been treating you, and what is going on in your life with Sovereignty Camp and your projects. And so what's going on, Dan?
Well, I don't know if you've seen our video that we posted recently, the 2020 Year of the Warrior. I posted it on my YouTube channel, and I also shared it to my Facebook world.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get a chance to see that?
Was that with the brother from Australia?
No, that was something prior. But no,
Okay.
I just released this one 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
So check that out, brother.
Yeah, I will.
That one it'll tell you a lot about my journey.
Awesome.
2020 has been a brutal year, real brutal year here, but
Yeah.
also showed us what we're made out of. I think through
Yep.
the COVID. I think everything we've done here thus far has given me a great support and foundation to really rise to the occasion of COVID.
So you've already done one interview on this podcast where you talked about the kind of the origins of Sovereignty Camp, um and that was a pretty great episode, and people were pretty into that. And I kind of was just curious about Sovereignty Camp and your process with Sovereignty Camp 2020, and how COVID has affected your project, and maybe how it's affected your goals for Sovereignty Camp. And yeah, and that's what I've been curious about when I think about you, Dan, is Sovereignty Camp really changed my life, and definitely touched my heart, and I definitely believe in you and what you're doing, and believe in Sovereignty Camp, and just wanted to ask you about what's going on with Sovereignty Camp after 2020.
All right. Well, first of all, we've kind of had a name change, and we are titled the Young Warrior Society. This year we had to. That's why I thought the video would really shed a lot of light, that we had to rise up, into what is a warrior. And a warrior protects the people. A warrior's there to serve the people. I think a lot of people, they have a misconception of what a warrior is. They want to pound their chest and think, I'm willing to die at the battlefields, and that is true, but a warrior is also a protector of the people, protector of our environment, protector of the lands, protector of our culture. And this year we rose up to that in so many levels. And if you watch the video, it really signifies what we were able to do here. And one of the things that we had to learn was get to our cultural traditions and our cultural ways, which one is always based in prayer and recognition of our land, recognition of our natural and our spiritual world. So we got into our plant medicines, food medicines, our natural foods, our natural plants that are here on our land. And we also got into food sovereignty, which was doubling the size of our garden and using the food to help the people, because we've had a lot of tragedies here. We had some large scale fires that were caused by natural sources, as well as we had a string of arsons.
Oh, wow.
Really hurt our local area. So we were at the forefront of the help and the emergency aid. We supported another large group of, not a large group of people, I would say, just people who generally cared locally, who rose up to the occasion. The River Warrior Society and Aid of Portland. And so, yeah, it was really amazing just to see the volunteerism as you was a part of on our first, year. And like that, we've been creating networks. So a shout out, to our supporters that have helped us, like Inland Northwest Permaculture Guild really came and helped out a lot. And they will be back here this spring, a few of them, to help us.
Awesome.
I worked really hard at grant writing. So Ilha He Fund, the Potlatch Fund, Centered MRG Foundation have really supported us a lot to keep this dream alive. because, as a grassroots foundation, community volunteer effort, we've had to really struggle in finding support and people to believe in what we're trying to do, and to have that financial support to get some of the tools and things we needed.
Mm-hmm.
And been really helpful in a huge way. Otherwise, right now, this would all just have been a dream, I guess you would say. It wouldn't have been reality. And I would have been really struggling. But thankful to the Patreons that have helped me, and getting by. And it's been a really wonderful year getting to see who your true friends are, your true networks of support, people who truly believe in you, and people who are truly there for you. You get to see that. And the positive thing here right now is there's a few young people that are really looking to continue this on and locally. And I'm really thankful to my niece, Sheena Red Autumn, because she will be my predecessor in this. So this will live on even after I'm in the ground,
Yeah.
So I'm instilling within her everything that I hope to attain here, and I'm going to continue to work on it this year. We have some big projects, but again, the struggle is with COVID.
Yeah.
And social distancing,
Yeah.
how we make it happen.
I've been curious about how your community has been affected by COVID and how you all have responded to the pressures and the stresses of COVID. Because what I remembered very fondly from my experience in Nispelum in the Colville Reservation was that the community was so close and intimate, and everybody just really took care of each other, and everybody's always looking out for each other, and I remember having that getting to go drive around with your Uncle Ernie and pick up TP poles and stuff, and getting to listen to his perspectives and all that. And I was just really touched by that, and I'm just curious about how you, being the person in a exemplary leadership role that you are, in my eyes at least, what's your perspective on your community's response to COVID in 2020?
Well, we've had to find ways to support ourselves spiritually. So we do have a group of men who've taken it upon our own initiative to strike up our sweat lodge every week, in prayer and support. And I think that's a really strong foundation, because there's so many people that were struck, with anxiety, with paranoia and fear. And so we've been trying to keep that base of prayerful, foundation for people. And we've been maintaining that. And I'm really proud of my Sweat Lodge brothers and ceremonial people. We gathered foods, medicines that are currently helping others north of the border, because once COVID struck, our tribe is basically cut in half on this border, what they call Canada. And they can't get some of our traditional foods and things like that down here. So we've kind of had to smuggle some things up north in a way to help them. And that's what we help them, so they can conduct their prayer ceremonies that normally are conducted this time of year. And we are also providing food and medicines for some of our ceremonies that will take place here. But also, again, we went and gathered a lot of the medicines for the people. So when people actually got the COVID, we're able to provide them with some medicines to help them, and as well as food. And the other thing that we did was we constructed sweat lodge for some of our brothers, and that really helped them. And they documented, some of the results, which was really inspirational and helped some local tribes, people who were also had their loved ones sick with COVID. And I think that was one of our cultural ways of rising to that occasion, through our own ceremonies, through our own plant medicines,
Good.
through our own prayers and our own ceremonies. So right now, Nespelum in my community, which is between 800 to 1,000 people, perhaps, we have 17 cases of COVID here. So we're still fighting,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, a lot of the medicines that we've gathered have been kind of been utilized already. So hopefully when spring rolls around here, we'll be able to gather what we can, and try to gather more medicines.
Yeah, that's important. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I think a lot of people don't know about that part of Washington and the Okanagan area, that the Colville Reservation is a kind of like a amalgamation of different tribal groups that were put together on one reservation. And I was wondering if you could speak to that to the listeners that aren't aware of that or don't know where that is.
Well, we're basically a little over an hour drive south of the Canadian border in the middle of Washington State. Where I live here, you could say it's where the desert meets the mountains. Plateau area, which is deserty in eastern Washington. Then we're like right at the foothills of the mountains. So we have the Columbia River, which is from over there. They might associate that like with the Mississippi.
Yeah,
It's a
totally.
huge river, and it has on our reservation, they have the Grand Coulee Dam, which is the biggest hydroelectric dam, I think, in our northern hemisphere. And so it's right here at the border of our reservation. And so we have rivers, lakes, a lot of wildlife, a lot of mountainous areas, a lot of hunting, trees. So it's only about 20-minute drive and we're up in the mountains, and so it's interesting in that aspect, but we have equal amounts of the four seasons. So we're kind of at the end of our winter snowy period, and pretty soon we'll be blessed with the springtime when foods grow. But through our reservations, 1.4 million acres, which is roughly the size of the state of Rhode Island. That's just a small portion of our traditional homelands. Through the genocide and western expansion, our reservation keeps getting cut, but we extend all the way up into Canada, which is now known as British Columbia. So our region is pretty vast, and within its vastness is different foods, different plants grow in different regions. So one time our people had a really powerful trading network, that helped sustain us with the plants and medicines and whatnot. So the blessing of what we're doing here is we've been extended out to our relatives who now reside in those areas, such as the Methow, our relatives in Leavenworth, which is by Wenatchee, our relatives up in Republic, and all these different areas where people once roamed, but now we've been forced out of those regions and secluded into this reservation boundaries within this camp, I've been reaching out to, our brothers and sisters out there and creating networks. So we go out to the out to the, um, the groups out there like the Saskatoon, you know, um, primitive life skills camp.
Saskatoon Circle.
Yep, and many others that who come out here and support us,
Yeah.
and and vice versa. We go out there and support them at their gatherings too.
Yeah.
So it works both ways, and eventually,
Yeah.
like Saskatoon, I know that they want to see more indigenous people at their gatherings. So this is kind of creating a bridge,
Yeah.
humanity and unity. So once them groups, those communities, those families come here, they get to meet people locally, like you met Ernie and
Yeah.
others here. We get to build friendships, and we get
Yeah.
to break down these barriers of racism. And I think that's especially important for the youth who get to
Mm-hmm.
experience that, because the youth, for example, um, like that first year with Kenny, the goat guy.
Kenny.
Yeah, the next year the kids were like, "Hey, where's the guy with the goats? Where's
Yeah.
they were all gung ho to see him again. They loved him, and they didn't see him as a person wearing buckskin clothing and wearing a beard, and they didn't see guys as wearing dreadlocks and all this stuff. They just seen a real person who had a lot of love for him.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I love here is we get to expose our kids from the local schools and the Boys and Girls Club to come here and just experience all these people with different skills,
Yeah.
that come here, show them how to work with natural rope, create natural rope, how to tan hides, how to compost, how to build a fire, how to do like Elf comes out here and he likes to do, like a biochar fuel
Yeah.
and all the different things that people bring here, through their experience and what they're passionate about. They get to share this with the kids, and
Yeah.
touch the hearts of our reservation youth. And I think that's really a positive thing.
Yeah, that first camp experience was really healing for me. The cultural gaps that got bridged in that one experience, and how you opened up your property to just this random group of people to all get together, and it was so organic and such a close and intimate experience. It's something that COVID has given me such an interesting perspective on just like how much I used to take those kinds of experiences for granted when being close with other people, and that kind of setting was something that was so normal to us that we didn't even think anything about it. And I was pretty sad when COVID canceled the last season's camp, because I really wanted to come up to that and bring some seeds up there. And the work you're doing with bridging these cultural gaps is pretty profound, and it was really healing for me. And getting to spend time with the youth and the children over there, I think that was my favorite part of that whole experience. Like when Kenny was showing them how to make friction fire, and we were making cordage with them. They were so stoked about that. And
Yeah.
I know it's kind of hard to really think too far to the future with this, just with the unpredictability with COVID, but how has COVID influenced your plans?
Well, I'm trying to join this technology age more and more, and
Yeah.
part of it is I've gained like some equipment such as some better camera gear. I would love to do an overall documentary of everything that we've done here so far, which is if any of your listeners go to my website www.nanamkin.com,
Mm,
and they could see the videos from that year that you were here,
yeah.
as well as the other videos that we did through this last 3 years. But they also could see the most recent 2020 year. And basically, what I would love to do is I'm trying to find some grants And I would love to just do a really inspirational short documentary video, because I really think something like this could really help to break down barriers of racism
Yeah.
and promotes a really positive message to our youth and to all of our various communities, how we can work together. And those people who may not understand about my piece of land, I own 1 acre here, and the soil is a lot of clay. It's a dry, arid environment with a lot of wind, and it's pretty uh, desolate. And where you look out here, and I looked, because I do not have a green thumb. I'm a person that kills houseplants, you know? So I had no confidence in growing garden. I had no confidence in growing medicine plants. I had no confidence in growing fruit trees, rather even a lawn or anything, you know? And it's so arid and dry here, you know, we get really hot. And anyhow, now we're growing all of those things. We got fruit trees. We planted medicinal plants, you know, thanks to Skeeter and Friends of the Trees.
Yeah,
You
that's so awesome
know,
to hear.
here, Ariana and Colin and, you know, Cindy Rupert and many others who came here and helped us. And the thing is I really lacked a lot of confidence in doing any of this, and I didn't think it was possible. And if you go to our local grocery stores here on the reservation, the challenge is finding organic foods.
Yeah.
You will see no organic foods here. You'll have to drive all the way to Omak during the summer when they have farmers market or something during the summer, or travel 100 miles to Spokane, you know, to find, you know, some good source of organic foods. So this is the thing, is what kind of inspired me is working with the youth budget.
Yeah.
A lot of the youth programs rely on junk food, you know, to feed the kids. So you see a lot of the chips, you see the juices, you see the pizzas, you see, you know, all the things that are basically junk food, processed foods. If you go to our grocery store again, you know, you're not going to find that healthy organic foods. Our deli is the number one. From an employee there in the past told me that was their highest profit making, was their deli. And we live in a place where high diabetes
Yeah.
um, is prevalent, and so is heart disease and many other, you know, diseases and sicknesses and obesity and whatnot. And I associate that to our food source that's available and affordable, because organic foods is, you know, living on food stamps, you're not going to be able to afford organic foods.
Yeah.
So I wanted to learn how to make organic foods and how to share that with the people, and hopefully how to encourage our people. Like, if I could do this on 1 acre of land here, then that means anybody could do it here, you know, in our area.
Yeah.
Because again, I thought it was impossible,
Yeah.
but through the support, I know it's possible now.
Yeah.
The wealth of sharing that food, how beautiful that is to share it.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember, just sorry to answer your question. It's just that, you know, we're going to try to keep it going, you know. Actually, this week we're probably going to go out and get some starts. Um, Thankful again to um, Seeds of Resistance. Um, Chris Ostrander, he sent me some seed packets.
Awesome.
So, you know, we're going to get started on get some starts going. And, you know, we're going to just keep the food going. And we'll probably just do small gatherings, you know, to actually, a local college has just reached out to me. So Wenatchee Valley College. So I'm going to talk to them about what we're doing. And I'm also working with the Pascal Sherman Indian School now is they have been inspired to grow their own garden there now, and they've asked me to be a part of that, to as a community member, because they're creating curriculum around that. So basically everything that we're doing here, they're inspired to do in the school, but to create curriculum that prioritizes our indigenous led land-based education, which to me is so inspiring, because if you heard my TED talk, that's exactly what I was
Yeah.
talking about and trying to promote. And so to me, this is a blessing that we're heading in a good direction, and
Yeah.
people are taking note. The schools are seeing something positive about it. Now colleges are seeing something positive, and we're kind of getting our foot in the door.
Awesome.
That's a positive step.
That's so awesome. Well, definitely, I'm going to put your TED Talk link in the show notes for this podcast. And it's such an awesome thing that you're working as an educator to do this, Dan, because the important thing about the cultural bridges that you're helping create is just educating people about the reality of life on reservations, and the sad thing is that most Americans have no idea that reservations even exist. And I remember when I was driving around with your uncle Ernie, and we were going and picking up TP poles and stuff to bring them back to the property, and he was like telling me just about the challenges in the community of like living in alignment with your cultural and ancestral values while having to live under like the federal government, the state government, and the tribal government, and also living in accordance with your with your values, and how it's difficult, especially when Americans treat you all like you're a minority. And I remember Ernie said, like, we're not a minority, we're a nation. We speak our own language. We have our own tribal government. Like we're a nation. We're not a minority. And that's just the frustrating thing that most people don't realize. And that was so sobering for me, just coming to spend time with you all there at the first camp, was just seeing the reality of like the food desert situation on reservations and the access to good organic food. And I think that that's a really big example of systemic racism and white supremacy, how quality food access and like the communities where um, access to quality organic food is very easy, and then the communities where it's not easy to access, like reservation communities, have a really hard time accessing good food. So it's really good that you're as an educator showing people by example that to start from the ground up just by growing food on the reservation, and then educating people outside of the reservation just to the reality that you all are in. It's really important. And I was really excited to come and hang out with you this past year and do some first foods planting and come and bring some seed bundles up to plant with you guys. And I was pretty sad that we didn't get to do that this year, because that's also another really important part of your connection to the land is the food, especially the first foods of the Columbia Plateau, because it is like a desert up there, but it's also a very abundant landscape with the biscuit roots and the yampa. And I was just wondering about your relationship to the first foods on the Columbia Plateau and your community, and with the Columbia River being there, and your salmon and your people's relationship to salmon and how that's affected by the Grand Coulee Dam. And I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Well, I think there's many challenges, of course. The biggest thing is, right now we're getting ready for springtime, and a lot of our root fields are on the other side of the Columbia. And for us, unfortunately, with this type of environment, um, grain people who grow grain, wheat fields, all those, they overtaken those lands.
Yeah.
And for us, it's like a big checkerboard,
Yeah.
and you don't know where. I mean, it takes a lot to find a little small parcel of piece of land to even gather. In our, as you know, a lot of our roots and things, they grow in rocky areas, so it's a challenge, to get down there and dig them.
Yeah.
And also, as an indigenous person, I'm going to say that it's also dangerous, because you don't know a lot of these farmers out there and how they're going to react to you even being out there as an indigenous person
Yeah.
all by yourself. So there are some dangers, and there are some risks, but also the other dangers and risk is that they use pesticides on their fields.
Yeah.
So how much is that getting into the soil that where our foods grow out there? So that's another danger, is the cancer that people also can get from our foods, from the poisoning that
Yeah.
is being dropped by these planes that are out there, doing these crop fields. And our little patch that we find is located at a boundary area, and that's a part that kind of sucks, just like hunting. You go out there, and then there's all these no trespass signs, and trespassers will be prosecuted and all these things. So it's kind of sad in a way. You almost feel like a outcast or a stranger in your own
Yeah.
uh, traditional gathering territories, and where you don't know if you're safe and gathering, and that's the unfortunate part.
Mhm.
And I would say that's a huge part that we have to endure and face every year, as well as some of these companies. They'll hire immigrants, or they'll hire um, you know other people to come in and just rake, like our that they'll use rakes for like our huckleberry growing grounds, and they just come in and just shred them all, and these things don't regrow after they're being raked, but they'll just hire a busload of them to come out there. They just tear up the traditional territories and that we're accustomed to gather that, and a lot of these things causes distrust, like, so people like say, well, we don't share this knowledge, because this is what they'll do, is they'll come in and they'll
Yeah.
take our foods, and so because of the capitalism, once people, um, commercial companies get aware of the benefits of these foods and the natural healing and the medicinal properties of these foods, then they'll utilize it for their own personal wealth and gain, you
Yeah.
know. And so it's been really hard on how to go forward, move ahead, collectively, and what knowledge to share. And so this is something to moving forward.
I am a bird, I am a bird, I am a bird coming home to rest in my nest. Wrap your arms, wrap your arms, wrap your arms round me like a flame in my fiery bed. flame in my fiery bed, and the clouds how they fall when they're closing in. Do 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 do. I am a drop of water, but you won't notice me in such a great big fire. I am a drop of water, but you won't notice me in such a great big fire. It surrounds you, it surrounds you, it surrounds you, it surrounds you. I am a bird, I am a bird, I am a bird, coming home to rest in my nest, wrap your arms, wrap your arms, wrap your arms round me like a flame in my fiery bed, like a flame in my fiery bed. I am a drop, I am a drop, I am a drop of water floating in the sea. But you won't notice me.
one of the things that really hit me when I started learning about the first foods was like a whole deeper level of racism and white supremacy and how it's played itself out in stealing land and taking away the ability for indigenous communities to be traditional stewards of their landscapes and to gather the foods that they have been gathering for thousands of years and have the ceremonies and songs for those foods that they've been utilizing for so long. And it's really a difficult thing to like educate people about that. That's something I'm always navigating because I care about these seeds and these first foods a lot, but I also, not being indigenous, I'm always trying to like walk with this in a culturally sensitive and non-appropriative way, because these first foods are very culturally sensitive to the indigenous communities, you know, and I'm always thinking like about how to just walk with that, you know, because the first foods, when I started learning about them, they really showed me a different side of white supremacy and genocide and colonization that I actually wouldn't have been aware of if I hadn't gotten to know these foods, because these foods are inseparable from your culture. It's like we are what we eat, you know, and when we are on one landscape for so long and we eat the foods of that landscape and we tend that landscape, we become that landscape. And I just think our culture of white supremacy just doesn't recognize that sort of relationship with the landscape and doesn't advocate for that. So how are you in folks in your communities finding ways to advocate for your traditional gathering places and your foods, interfacing with farmers and the law and the federal government and public lands? Like that seems like a really tricky thing. What is your experience and perspective on that?
I wish they would advocate for it more. You know, I think that I would love to see them eventually buy big tracts of land and be able to just replant those lands. So, you know, they would have food sources and locations, safe locations to go generation after generation. And I think that's very important. And I don't know of any advocation with our tribe currently in place to do that. But to me, I think that would highly help a lot of us, you know, because again, just the aspects of not knowing if your food's poison because
Yeah.
you know, local people are spraying, you know, their plots, and you don't know if you're going to get arrested for trespassing, or if you're going to get run out, or if you're, you know, get racial slurs or different things.
Yeah.
That and racism has just grown so reared its ugly head this, you know, recently, that much more, where you could feel the tension out there, and it's sadly it's doesn't make you feel very safe, you know, and I think that hinders a lot of people in wanting to go out there. And plus there's just not enough places available to us to sustain all of our population that's here. You know, the numbers of people that go out to dig are getting smaller and smaller, it seems, you know, or keeping at a small level because, you know, it just there ain't enough places out there to that are available, you know, to us. We just have to find little pieces here and there that, you know, that might be open and not fenced in, and that's like right by the roadside in many occasions, you know, and it's kind of sad. But I would hope that I was just talking to a friend. I know there's a big push on land back, you know, and I think that's something that would be really beneficial, you know, that we start to get some of our traditional territories and to get those specifically for replant and long-term harvest.
Absolutely. It's a really important thing. I've been thinking about the land back, and not only just the importance of returning physical land, but for advocating for the land sovereignty rights of indigenous communities too, because it's not just the land, it's the sovereignty of indigenous nations and communities that that also needs to be protected and advocated for, and another thing that's kind of connected to all this, it's like you kind of brought it up, and you're in a way you're kind of reviving aspects of it, is what you talked about, the trade networks and the importance of trade networks historically, and how networking and creating relationships with people can not only like help with this land back project, because like just educating people that have a lot of land that don't use it can plant the seeds in those people to like to understand these deeper issues, but also just like the history of trade networks on this continent, with the indigenous peoples all across this continent, were so sophisticated and so far reaching, and so many plant foods, medicines, and materials were transported all across the country. And how that was obviously a part of the government and the military's strategy in colonization, was destabilizing and eliminating these old trade networks and trade relationships that provided a lot more stability. And it's a conversation I've had with people, like, when I'm talking about ecology and plants, of like how certain native plants have ended up in certain places. Ecologists and botanists, they never really seem to acknowledge that these plants ended up where they were because, indigenous communities planted them and transported them through these trade networks, and there's also just like a lot of that kind of denial and racism and white supremacy present in a lot of in Western science in general, and especially in relationship to ecology and plants, and indigenous land management practices, and like the kind of the cultural landscapes. And wrapping it back around to the trade networks, could you speak to what you know about like the trade networks, and like how and why that's so important to bring this back up today in today's kind of context?
Well, right now with the COVID, for example, or any other situations, I think it would relieve a lot of people of the anxieties and fears. If we worked as tribal nations together in support of one another, just kind of what we did with our relatives north of that Canadian border,
Yeah.
Being able to provide them with our traditional roots, medicines that does not grow up there, but we utilize in our tribal ceremonies this time of year, and vice versa. That the foods that grow up there, and the medicines, that are plentiful up there, if we helped each other in that way, because just like even locally, in the Methau and the Spokane reservation, there's different things that grow plentiful in that region that does not grow here. And at one time, salmon here was just so very plentiful, but now there's very little. And, within this way, our trade network, connected us all the way to the coast, and all the way to the plains, and way down south and way up north. And the Columbia River, was our tool of transportation.
Yeah.
And we had protocols of respect, and people who don't know anything about that could look at the tribal canoe journeys and see that these tribes are following protocols. When we go there, there's a certain amount of respect, acknowledgement to those people and to the land that are there. We live in a modern society now where it's all about me,
Yeah.
individual wealth. And so people are struck, on this what they feel is wealth, money and conveniences, luxuries, all these things that they focus on, and they don't see the true wealth as a larger unity, a larger connection, because once you hit catastrophes, whether it be nationally or either within your own circle or even within your own heart, if you're only about me, then you don't have that larger connection of support. And our larger connection uplifted our people to live, with a high degree of health
Yeah.
and prosperity and wellness and vitality, because we had the foods, medicines from the coast. We had the foods and medicines from the plains in all our areas, but we also had reciprocation with our fellow people, our social networks.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a form of respect, which is our protocols. So our people were very given, kind, and generous. And this is a true leader was not known by how much things he possessed, but by how much he gave away.
Yeah.
So this is the thing that modern society totally is pushed aside, in lieu of individual wealth.
Yeah.
And these are the things I think with our trade networks that we could learn to separate ourselves from this ego,
Yeah.
and understand humility
Mm-hmm.
for the good of the people, the good of your people who you're serving as leader over, to give and to be generous and kind. And so I'm just demonstrating that at a small level here on 1 acre of land,
Yeah.
and hopefully once we build this, that our tribal nations will even learn to observe it and take note, that our communities of all sort of nations and communities will learn this and take note. And that's why I wanted to do a documentary, just to have something that would be really eye-opening
Yeah.
to them, so they could see that, hey,
Absolutely.
if we break down this barrier of racism, we break down these barriers of want and greed, and we get back to what's real, then maybe our children will have a better future and learn how to live and eat together and grow together.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's like you said, it's not just about the trade network and about just like trading some of this for some of that. It's about the deeper relationships and the spirit of reciprocity, and the principle of reciprocity in our individual, within ourselves and within our personal relations and with our relations to the land, and then relationships to all the different communities everywhere and just like this whole continent. That's like, and that's the beautiful thing about the Young Warrior Society is just like I feel like that was one of the main teachings I left that with, was just this overall spirit of reciprocity, teaching like white folks from our culture to come respectfully and humble to your homeland on your property, and be open-minded, and that's what I appreciate about you, Dan, is just how humble you are, and the Young Warrior Society it is humbling, because like for people like me, and like white folks like myself that came to that first camp, it was really humbling. And there's a lot that we think we know that we realize we don't know, and a lot of cultural values that have been kind of instilled into us from growing up in our like consumer hyper individual culture of me, coming into like a different cultural context, and just even learning about the concept of cultural sensitivity and like cultural reciprocity and solidarity. It's really important. And I think that that's like why I think that what you're doing is so important, because it's like thinking about it on a micro and macro scale, like the first camp in the Young Warrior Project. It is a small project right now, but it is making such a big ripple effect, because that little group of people that came there, had a big ripple and it made a big splash in all of their lives. And they went out and they talked to other people about it, and it affected a lot of people, which is cool too, which brings me to this next thing I was wanting to ask you about is your new podcast and see what's going on with that. I think it's really cool that you have a podcast or you're getting that going, and especially kind of as an adaptation to COVID to continue to bridge gaps with people and to reach out and continue to be an educator like you are. How's it been?
Well, I just sent you my link tree. So if you want to post that up, anybody find me, they just click on that link tree and they'll see at the very top is Honor All Life podcast. And I started this around Christmas time, and we rushed at it. We were trying to get it going. Again, I'm not tech savvy, and I just got this equipment. I had my friend trying to help me, couldn't be available because of his work and everything that he has going on. So I had to try to learn myself, and the quality wasn't really there because we first tried to start on a YouTube. And the reason why we did it at Christmas time is I prior to Standing Rock 4 years ago, I was a community center director. I managed our community activities here for a decade here, and within this large complex that I was head over and managed, we managed everything from A to Z, from weddings to basketball tournaments to big cultural events, powwows, youth wrestling tournaments, youth events, tribal gatherings, funerals, everything. But our number one priority was always funerals. And funerals happened, and within our culture, we were there with that deceased for 3 to 4 days during those services. And through my decade of working there, I noticed that during the holiday seasons in the winter months are the year that we had more funerals happen. Wow. And I think we live in a poverty-stricken area. We also, through the cultural genocide and the forced assimilation and everything that's taken place here, many people struggle with alcoholism, addictions, violence, that cycle of violence that continues to this day. Yeah. And I notice, especially during the holiday seasons in the winter, that's when our fatalities spike. Wow. So I tried to get some words out for inspiration and support. So people, and I did it live at 5 on Friday evenings. Being a former alcoholic myself, in April I'll be 13 years clean and sober. Yeah. But I noticed through my own history that Friday evenings were also my hard point. That's where I would kind of make my decision on what I was going to do that weekend, which is, mainly get out there, and I knew what party I was going to and whatnot. So I just wanted to do something that would kind of inspire, maybe somebody to maybe think and give them another resource, but also to create some awareness to the decolonization and of our mind, that maybe many community people out there in this nation, that they might want to know about Native culture, but they don't know where to go and to ask, or maybe some things that like the land back, land acknowledgement, ballots, and just to inspire our connection to Mother Earth. What does that truly mean? And so I share some of our stories and things like that, my own personal experiences that, could help someone to understand a little bit more clearly. And but I'm not a big fan of podcasts, to be honest. To me, it's very hard because I'm a visual person.
Mm-hmm. Really.
Podcast, you're talking without really knowing who's even listening.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's kind of sad because there's hardly any listeners. You're thinking, man, I did all this dang work and nobody's even cares, So I don't like that, and I don't like that feeling. And so anyhow, my my goal was just to get us through the winter months.
Yeah.
And so I probably only have, maybe one, two, couple podcasts left, and we'll just see how it goes from there. If uh, if if viewer pop in and there's more engagement, then I might be encouraged to go a little longer. But my hope was to get us through the winter time. So we'll see what happens, and if it's something that I pick back up during next winter or what, I don't know. But it's called Honor All Life Podcast on Anchor Podcast. And if you watch our YouTube video, and you'll see how that was really inspired, because I also went through the grief and pain of loss, and man, that just tore my world apart, tore my heart apart, and I'm still healing from that. And so the other part of this is, I know, as well as myself, I lost a lot of some friends from COVID, community people in our circles from COVID, and I know a lot of people been affected by grief and loss. So this was one of the big reasons I posted this podcast, was to kind of support those that are struggling with that grief and that pain. And initially, I started to go down through the 5 steps of the grief and loss, and to bring my own personal experiences through that, and what helped me to get through it, which was my culture and things I've learned from our ancestors and through my elders, and things that I thought could be of help to other people. But again, it really hasn't struck a lot of people there yet. So we'll see what happens, brother. Maybe I have to try another format.
Well, the podcasts, they definitely take a lot of time. I'm definitely new to it all, and I just kind of help Kelly get interviews and stuff. She works so hard on her podcast and has definitely built it from the ground up, and it's been years since she started it, and it is like such a labor of love. She's so dedicated to it, and we'll definitely shout out your podcast and make sure to put it all in the show notes, and I think that people will be really interested in what you have to say too, because it's relevant. And I saw one of your Facebook posts this winter, like a couple weeks ago, about what you just said, just like just you were saying just some uplifting words, about just like the grief and the depression of winter, just like the struggling, just like the struggle that we're all in collectively together, and what I appreciate about what you said there, Dan, is that it kind of brought me a little bit out of focusing just on myself and like taking a look at the bigger picture of the situation that we're all in together here, and seeing it on that level, not as like, oh, I'm struggling, but yeah, we're all struggling, and that we're all going through this together, and that we're all going to get through this together. We can't get through it just alone, and it's a good example that we need to be reminded of, especially like in this like hyper individual focused culture we live in, not to be so self-centered in our struggles, but to like kind of wake up to the fact that like we're all struggling. The land is struggling, the waters are struggling, the air is struggling. All of us are in this together. And that's why when you put out that post, I got inspired to hit you up and ask about just like a new interview, just because I just want to hear about what's going on and like kind of what inspired that post. And you kind of just like told me, I didn't know that you did that community work with funerals, and just like it kind of sheds a new light on like how hard winter is for a lot of people, and it kind of like sheds light on like the like this winter I've had out here, where it's just like wet and cold and gloomy. This is like oddly the weirdest winter I've ever had. And it kind of just like makes me realize what I've taken for granted and the privilege I've had my whole life of just like, you know, not only just like the dry, fluffy, cold snow of Colorado, but just like the good environment, and like the life I took for granted that so many people don't have in winter. And winter is a really difficult time for so many people that are in vulnerable situations in vulnerable communities, you know?
Yes.
Yeah. I guess just the last question. Yeah, we've been on for about an hour. I guess I just was curious about like what your perspective is on like the kind of collective situation of our whole culture right now, post-election, this new administration. You know, what is your perspective, you know, as like a kind of like an indigenous leader right now?
Well, I think what you said just previously a few minutes ago was a great uh, reflection on what I was trying to point out. You know, is that we are in this hyper individual um, sense of community, and we're also within that we are also, in my opinion, my observation, because I do my Facebook post, and I gauge, I see what the interests are. You know, if I wanted to put some political things out there, with the raw um, things that get people angry and upset, there'd be so much engagement. There'd be so much, you know, action and activity in a post like that.
Yeah.
Now, if I was a beautiful person and I want to post a really luscious video and shot of myself, yes, there's gonna be a lot of likes and a lot of great comments that, oh, well, you're so beautiful. Or if I want to share this beautiful thing about cooking or something else, you know, a lot of people, you know, might be more attracted to those things. But once you really post some really heartfelt, you know, things, there's often a lot less engagement, you know, on what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, I see less and less. And just like, for example, when I post out my podcast, there's only just a handful of people that even comment, or and rarely even any comments, you know, on something that is so deep and heartfelt, you know, on these messages. And then there's just so far fewer engagement in that, and everybody's caught up into, you know, wanting to be a part of this action. And they I think a lot of people are missing social interaction, so they create these things that create more engagement and attention. And if we look at that deeper, you know, each one of us, we could feed our ego, you know, we could do that. Or, you know, we could continue to find out what's real in life, you know, and that's our deeper connection to
Mhm.
our Tamhula, Mother Earth,
Yeah.
all of our spiritual things that are here,
Yeah.
our teachings and our way of life, which is a lot of discipline and humanity, which is to all of us is a new challenge, really, you know, because we've been so distanced from each other, you know, as people, as race, through the social, the economic and capitalism and all these things that have kept us segregated and separated. We have a great opportunity now to create these, you know, friendships and working relationships. But again, it's like you said, brother, a lot of the uh, people from your culture, they don't understand, you know, our thinking, our way of life,
Yeah.
and they take that for advantage. And sometimes people want to use that um, as cultural appropriation for their own gain, and that's totally not acceptable, you know. And so it's really a hard road, how to go forward, how to move ahead. And when a lot of people, they'll also think that our ways have no values, have no meaning. So I
Mm.
thank you, you know, for your support and you know, your good words, because you really captured a lot of the meaning that I wish to share. And, I think that to me, going forward, it just learning a little bit more about humility. And I, one of us, I mean, they never learned humility. This society doesn't teach humility, and they don't teach generosity. Another thing is to learn forgiveness and how to break these cycles of violence, that we hold from historic trauma. So how to heal ourselves. So I think taking this time, we have to go into a deeper healing as individuals. If we want to do something individually, that's the step I would promote people to take, is that deeper sense of healing and understanding and breaking free from your own cycle of violence. And if you have hate in your heart, anger, racism, if you think you're better than other people, or if you're have a lot of these different things in your heart, then I would say take a closer look at that. And there are things I kind of try to share in my podcast, is and hopefully with this book that I'm going to start writing. And I'd like to learn how to create my videos. Like these last 4 years traveling across the nation, I kind of lived a life like Lord of the Rings, so many different tribes of people. I mean, I was on the canoes, I was at the powwows and with the wild horse cowboys and permaculture group, Fairy Congress, and Saskatoon, and then I was down to rainbow gatherings and music and yada yada yada. But I got to learn about humanity from so many levels and groups of people, even all the way from Hawaii to New York to Burning Man and yada yada yada, and I've taken that into heart, and that's what I hope to try to find is a commonality, and moving forward during this time. And I hope that more people would begin to put their differences aside and really find a deeper sense of meaning, which is more than us. It's more than me and you, brother. It's some trees out there. It's that natural world, and it's our connection to that natural world for the benefit beyond ourselves, the benefit to the seventh generation yet to come, that we think of them more than we're thinking of us. So it's the work that you are doing, I am doing, we're working towards that, but we have to have this communication and understanding and moving forward. So I thank you, brother, for
Thank you, brother. Yeah, Dan, thank you so much I know you're busy, and I thought about that when I reached out to you. I was like, man, I know Dan's busy, but like I'm gonna burden you for an interview just because I love what you gotta say, and I'm thankful for your friendship, and I'm thankful for how I found my way into your life like that. I've been really influenced in a really profound way by you, and that was a full interview right there, and I'm just so thankful it's good to see your face on Zoom. It's kind of cool that we can do this, and I'm sending my best to you and to your community, and hope that we get to collaborate again soon. I'm really looking forward for this COVID thing to get over with so we can come back together and plant some seeds together. And
well, if any of your viewers want to reach out and support us or look at us, see what we're about, on that link tree, they could find my website. They also, if they want to support us through the Patreon, they can, or they want to check out the YouTube or Honor All Life during our last podcast, or even the YouTube where we started the first two sessions of grief and loss. They're welcome to check that out. But I hope that they look at the website and they look at our past land project videos, where Gabe is also on there. You gotta
good time
here is on there, and
good
I'm
time.
always happy, and I'm really looking forward to this year. We hope to build a pit house here, so that's what we're going to be fundraising for, is to try to build a pit house, which is so we could really create our stories. I would really like my TED talk, I talked about our storytelling, and with the videos and things, I really want to create more content. And actually, I worked on this other project, and we won Sister. It's called Sister Wolves. It's a short animation about our tribal stories and legends.
Cool.
And we won the award at the Skins Fest at the Film Fest down there. And I think our film is out in that Maori, so New Zealand Film Fest. It's going to be over there. So being able to talk about our stories, and this is what I want to create here, is our storytelling lodge, because to me, as you'll see in my last podcast I did just yesterday, that I talk about the importance of these stories and our connection to the land. And I think that's just getting to the root of the very essence of our foundation here is our stories. And I think if people reached out to that, I think they would learn. So maybe your viewers who want to check out an app called Native Land, they could see a resource wherever they live at. There's an app that they could download, and it'll tell you whose land you are on. And a lot of those will give you also resources and links to get further history of
That's
that
great. That'll be great to put that in the show notes for this. People can have access to that. That's really awesome, Dan. Another thing, Dan, weren't you, I remember you traveled down to Colorado to act in a film, right?
Yes.
What was that film called?
It's called The Orphan Train, and it should be out sometime this year.
It's going to be coming out this year. I've been wondering about that and looking forward to that. So we'll definitely shout that out when that comes out.
Yeah. On that crazy road I was telling you about, I got to be in a zombie film.
Are you serious?
Z Nation. I was played on Z Nation.
Wow.
And a couple of different documentaries and whatnot. So yeah, it's been pretty entertaining. I almost feel like a Jack from Titanic. My work is really wild and experiences,
Yeah, that's what I love about you, man. You're very cultured. I love it, man. You've definitely traveled a lot, and you're very relatable. And it's just like always fun talking to you like that.
The podcast right before you, because there's another person did a podcast, and they're from Australia, and they want to do a cultural exchange, and so we're going to work at maybe something like that for the future.
Wonderful.
Go do cultural exchanges with the indigenous Aborigine people in Australia, and I think, wow, that's something I think would be beautiful to uplift some of our local youth so they could travel outside of our areas, because some of them never ever left this area in their life, and to be able to bring them around to different areas and do cultural exchanges, where they actually can earn, a few dollars and, get to experience a new culture and communities. I want to share that, with the youth, some of these experiences that I've had. So that's kind of my hope with doing maybe a vlog in the future. So tell them to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and hopefully I'll be posting some vlogs here once I that.
Yeah, for those folks of you listening, if you have any way to support Dan's work, this is a really good, we'll leave all the links in the show notes for you to be able to reach out to support Young Warrior Society and these really important projects. And again, Dan, thank you. And if there's anything else you want to say?
Well, I just tell everybody in my language, in our language here, we say lemlemt, thank you. And we don't say goodbye. There's never a goodbye. We'll always see each other again. And
Mm-hmm.
just want to inspire people, and thank you most of all for being with us for this duration of time. And my brother Gabe here is a good man. He's good spirit. I've seen him in his journeys, and he's really devoted himself to the foods. And I have a lot of respect for him in that way, and what his desiring to do. And when I see people with good hearts like that, I'm more than happy, to support them in what they're doing, because that's aligns, with what we're doing and what we want to encourage our youth to get back to. We want to
Mm-hmm.
encourage our youth to commit themselves to the land and to get away from these cell phones and TVs and whatnot, just for a while, to learn while they still can, while there's still people to teach. And unfortunately, just like you lost a great friend and someone who taught you, many of us have lost our elders.
Yeah.
And that's resources that will no longer be here. That's inspiration that will no longer be here. And nowadays we have to realize that each one of us, are not guaranteed, this full life that we think that we have, and we often put our goals, all these other things, our mortgages and everything else way before, you know, our connection to the land and to our roots that could serve our future generations. So to always think ahead, and this is what our ancestors have taught us, is to think ahead for the future generations. So we think beyond ourselves. And me, I could go into a whole nother story on how that also inspired my life at a time that I was really down and hurting. But to understand a greater connection to your ancestors and to your future really empowers your spirit,
Mm-hmm.
and that you are never alone, especially when you realize and are connected to the nature and to our natural world and to our spiritual world. You will realize that you are not alone, and you don't have to have all these fears, that we often associate with material wealth.
Yeah.
So thank you, brother, for
Thank you, Dan. Means a lot to me. Lem Lem.
Hey y'all, you just listened to another episode of the Ground Shots podcast featuring Gabe Crawford as guest host this time and in conversation with Dan Nanamkin. The interstitial music for this episode was I Am a Bird by Finn Swale, and the theme music for the Ground Shots podcast on every episode of the podcast is Sweat and Splinters by Mother Marrow. You can find links in the show notes to Dan's work and ways you can support the podcast on Patreon or through one-time donations. This show was produced by me, Kelly Moody, and guest hosted this time by Gabe Crawford. Until next time, y'all, thanks for listening. Every piece of wood I bring carries a story in lichen, fungus, beetles, maze. It's the same to you, all ablaze. When you burn, burn with the light of the morning's birth. Burn with the heat at the heart of the earth. Burn with the light that reveals our faces. Burn with the heat that will warm these places. Some may fear your endless greed, but not me. No, not me. Some may fear your appetite, but I'm at home in your life. Fiery fingers curling round, flaming tongues aflutter. Promise you